This doesn't light your firemen, the pilot lights out.
This football team is coming into our place. We're standing in our way.
This is a game of the heart. Focus and finish.
Happy Veterans Day, folks, and a special shout out to all of our military veterans. Make sure you say thank you to any veterans you may come across today. I can't imagine what life would be like here in the U.S. if the veterans of our armed forces hadn't been so dedicated and made the sacrifices for us that they did. Take a moment and reflect upon that today. You'll be better for it. All right, how can we not start off this segment with Tavon Austin? What can you say? Just an electrifying day. But here's the thing. No one ever questioned what Austin could do in space. His quickness makes him look like a high school kid playing against the Pop Warner team. But let's be real here. He still doesn't have a grasp on the playbook, and consequently, he doesn't play all that much. He was targeted just 3 times on the day, with 2 of them going for 138 yards and 2 touchdowns, and the Rams' defense gets the fantasy points for his special teams prowess. Now, until I see him as at least a semi-every-down player, I can't play him hoping that he'll take 2 of every 3 passes thrown his way to the house each week. Now, on a positive note, he does have a suite of very creative end zone dances. And former Heisman Trophy winner Mark Ingram was at the game last night. I think this may have been the first time in his professional career that he actually attended one of his games. Now, there's a few things about Ingram and the other Saints offensive players. If you noticed, just about every one of the skill players on the Saints joined in the fantasy party last night. Now, if you or I were lined up as an offensive skill player against the Cowboys, we'd probably have put up some numbers too. At least I know I would have. The Saints offense is clearly a different team when playing at home. Just check out the stats. You need to factor in if the Saints players are playing at home or not when making your weekly roster decisions. Scott Tolzien, ladies and gentlemen, although I always thought it was Tolzien, but I have been known to put my accent on the wrong syllable from time to time. Hey, when he came into the game yesterday, I tweeted that despite the fact he never played an NFL snap before, he was no slouch, and I wouldn't have been surprised if the Packers won the game. Now, that didn't happen, as he did throw a pretty bad pick in the end zone behind the receiver that kind of changed the complexion of the game, but he otherwise played pretty well. Now, there's a few things here to note about Tolzien that you may not know. Mike McCarthy loves him as a quarterback, and just a few weeks ago, the Packers raised his practice squad pay from $6,000 a week to $36,000 a week, making sure that they didn't lose him to another team. And do yourself a favor and check out his stats at Wisconsin. He was the most efficient quarterback in the school's history before Russell Wilson came along. He'll get rips with the first team this week against the Giants, and I think he's absolutely a fantasy option going forward. He'll be the starting quarterback for the Pack until Rodgers comes back, and I expect him to be one of the more coveted free agents in the offseason as NFL teams scramble to upgrade their quarterback play. The Packers will be forced to pay this kid pretty handsomely if they want to keep him as Rodgers' backup. All right, I'm going to beg now. You happy? You got me to beg? Get rid of Trent Richardson. Dump him. I know I banned him from the show and I said I wouldn't talk about him again, but for some reason our viewers are infatuated with him. I don't get it. How is it possible that fantasy owners own him universally? Someone please contact me and let me know exactly what it is that you see, because I'm obviously missing it and I'm obviously in the minority. I'm not getting the same questions about Ray Rice, but for some reason you guys all think that Richardson is going to break out every week. 5 carries for 2 yards. It is what it is. They aren't even giving the ball in goal line situations anymore. If you're playing Trent Richardson every week, you're just clueless. Last night, I had an alarming number of people point out to me that they felt Peyton Manning's arm strength was a problem. In fact, to my amazement, I was clearly in the minority arguing the other way. Look, here's the thing. First off, it's hard for any of us to determine his arm strength from watching on television. The angle of the shot, the depth perception, and the fact that most of us aren't even in the same state he is when he's throwing a ball makes that a very tough assessment. The fact is that our views are formed partly from what we see, but also in part from what we read and hear from the media. As for what we read, let's be honest, most of it is simply conclusions made based upon the accounts someone else has seen firsthand, and more often it's simply information scraped off the internet from another source. Now, how many of the fantasy pundits or people in the mainstream media that you hear from or read about Peyton's arm strength are actually on the field or even on the practice field watching or experiencing this supposed problem firsthand? Have you heard any of the people actually catching the balls he throws complain about it? Here's a guy putting up arguably the best season that a quarterback has ever had in fantasy terms and in NFL terms, and people are simply looking to find something to create news or to create a name for themselves. Let's face it, you don't need someone like me to tell you that Peyton is good and he's going to play awesome. What's the value in that? But if someone like me keeps harping on this arm strength issue and at some point he fails, I'm going to say, hey, look, see, I told you so. I've been saying this for a long time. Look, if you want to be wrong for eons, eventually at some point you're going to be correct. And if that's what you're hanging your hat on, congrats to you on a great eventual call. In the meantime, man up and play me in daily fantasy each week for some money. I'll take Peyton and you grab someone else as your quarterback and let's see how we do. Look, Peyton will in fact fail at some point, and you guys said it first. Happy? Right now his ankle is the issue, not his noodle arm. So let's see what happens with this MRI he's having today, and then we'll reevaluate him for the Kansas City game. Today's Twitter question comes from @JHarris, who wants to know if I think it's now safe to play Marquise Colston. Well, first off, I already told you what I think about the Saints' offensive skill players playing at home versus on the road, at least most of them. Their offense works like a different team in the Superdome. That said, as Dr. Roto put it on Twitter last night, Colston avoided his own fantasy funeral with his performance yesterday. Considering the fact he didn't even suit up last week against the Jets and only had 11 catches for 44 yards with no touchdowns in the previous 3 games, I have to believe that he's now healthy once again, and he's safe to play as a strong wide receiver 3. Now, if you have a question you want answered, hit me up with a tweet, and if I don't use your question on the program, I will tweet you back with my best advice. Promise. And be sure to tune into the Roto Experts Fantasy Football News Notes and Analysis segment every weekday. I'll be here to keep you current and ahead of the competition, and on weekends, come back for This Week in Fantasy Football, as I team up with the King, Scott Engel, covering the week that was and the week that will be, answering your viewer questions. It is the Bullies against the winless tonight in Tampa on Monday Night Football. Hopefully we'll get to see some quality football and not have a telecast based on incognito Martin and an outgoing Greg Schiano. Enjoy the game, everyone. For Roto Experts, I'm Mike Cardano.